Hi, my name's Kim. I'm a licensed and nationally certified Chinese medical provider and a Taoist practitioner. And a lot of what I talk about is overall wellness, your overall wellness. And I think what might have started out my journey on the spiritual aspects of wellness started out here in Southwest United States, in the land of rock and skies. That was a long time ago, and I think it started this endless search for better understanding who we are, where we came from, why we act the way we do, why we do the things we do, what makes us us. I found by searching in the past that I was able to find different thoughts, different beliefs that could help me better process the world around me and how we interacted with that world. And one of the things that really works well for me is classical Chinese medicine. So I've been talking about the acupuncture clock in Chinese medicine and how that relates to our psycho-emotional life, how we express imbalances through each of the different layers of the acupuncture clock. The thing about the acupuncture clock and the Trinity is this is all about coping mechanisms. This is how we cope with life when life gets too overwhelming for us. So as certain things become more and more repetitive and become more and more overwhelming in our lives, we have a tendency to move down the acupuncture clock. So you start out with the first Trinity, where you take in the world and you take in the world without judgment, and things happen and you start putting a judgment on what you're experiencing. And then you move to the second Trinity, and what you've learned in the first Trinity with your interactions with people, you practice in the real world. And then from that practice, you get a lot of feedback, and then you're going to move to the third Trinity, which is where we're at right now. And that's how we take everything that we've learned and we make it personal about ourselves. We create the identity which we're going to express to the world. And again, if you're out of balance in any one of these areas, that's about coping mechanisms. That's about interacting with the world, getting overwhelmed in certain areas, and finding that you start picking up coping mechanisms to deal with this in the short term. And all these coping mechanisms, you can change them, you can work at it, you can acknowledge them, you can see them, and you can change them. So it isn't that you're doing these mechanisms or that you're doing this coping stuff and that's all you get. You can actually change this. And so just understanding that this is happening means that you can change it. So in the third Trinity, we're dealing with 4 organs again. We're dealing with the pericardium. We're dealing with the San Jiao, or the triple heater. We're dealing with the Gall Bladder. And we're dealing with the liver. And each of these organs has a different impact on your psycho-emotional behavior. So how about if we start out with the first one, which is the pericardium. The pericardium deals with how we rationalize our behavior. So there's more than one part to rationalization. We can rationalize what's going around us in the world to help keep us safe or to show better empathy for other people, or we can rationalize things so that it's never our fault. Can you hear the coyotes? They're really close. Or you can rationalize behavior so that it's never your fault, so that it's always everybody else's fault. So they're a jerk, they're just being a douchebag. And sometimes that's right? You know, when you look at the Me Too generation and all the women speaking up and just the tremendous amount of pushback they got, it wasn't that what they were saying was wrong. How they rationalized it was completely right. It's just that there was so much pushback coming from sources of authority. And so you can see in that situation where you're rationalizing things correctly, and yet you're getting all this pushback from people in authority. And then what can happen when that happens? You know, that constant denial of your existence, that constant refusal to acknowledge what's truly happening can create different pathologies in people. And let's look at what happens with the San Jiao. Well, let's look at the San Jiao. So the San Jiao, or the triple heater, that's another organ. And when that one's out of balance, you know what happens? You get really rigid. In fact, you have a difficult time seeing anybody else's view of the world. And when presented with somebody else's view of the world, there's an absolute refusal to accept that, or to even consider that something that they're saying might have some relevance. And you know, when that happens, the world can become a really lonely place, because who wants to be around you? You're so rigid, you're so demanding that you're difficult to be around. And if this goes on for too long, you become indifferent. Okay, so now what? You're rigid, you're kind of being a jerk, you're always rationalizing, you're always justifying why it's not your fault or why it's somebody else's fault. You're really having a hard time seeing yourself in this picture, and you're completely indifferent. So you're having a hard time making friends right now, and you're probably, again, feeling a little bit lonely. So what's the next progression? Well, the next progression is to the Gall Bladder, where that rigidity, that refusal to accept any other experience starts to show up in another way. And that's where you stop seeing options. You only see one answer. You only see one road. And you know, when you can only see one road, life gets really difficult. You can see that in different behaviors that people have, where instead of being willing to listen to other people, they're always starting a fight. They're always going to start a fight, or they're immediately defending themselves. The issue hasn't even come up and they're immediately defending themselves. So that's some areas where you start to see the gallbladder has become maybe too rigid, and the ability to see options has gotten really narrow, and that makes your world really inflexible. So you're inflexible, your world's inflexible, and the experiences you have are the same experience over and over and over again because of that inflexibility. Okay, what happens when you're dealing with the liver channel? What happens when your coping mechanisms get all the way over to the liver channel? That's when you're going to start to see things like excessive daydreaming, or maybe fantasizing a different world, fantasizing a different life, fantasizing a life with other people. You're going to also see different personality disorders. You can see things like schizophrenia. You can see things like bipolar disorders or multiple personalities. So all of this happens when you've been coping with things for so long, and now you're wondering what life would look like if it was something else. And here's the thing too. This isn't the end of the world, right? Because the liver channel is more than just that. The liver channel is also your opportunity for rebirth. So that you're here, that you're at that point, is your opportunity to also change your world and to become the person that you want to be. Okay, so you're probably wondering, okay, what can I do to change what's going on in this third trinity, to change these coping mechanisms, because they're getting really heavy, right? And they're getting really rigid, and they're cutting you off from people. And so what can you do differently? And I was on the phone today with a bunch of other healers. Guess what they were talking about? They were talking about gratitude. And so that's what I want to present, is practicing gratitude, which, okay, so let's just look at gratitude from a different perspective, because there's a lot of reasons why it's difficult for us to accept gratitude, right? It could be that maybe you don't think you're worthy of gratitude, or if you give somebody gratitude, you're going to owe them something, and you don't want to owe anybody anything, or that you're giving something away if you're sharing gratitude. Another one that could be really common is a sense of entitlement, that you've worked really hard for something, and you know you deserve this, and you don't have it, and so now it's really hard for you to feel gratitude for everything else that is going on in your life. Most of the blocks that happen with gratitude are associated with this third trinity. So to practice it, because whatever you practice, that's what you're going to become. So to practice gratitude is an opportunity to change your third trinity. Let's look again at entitlement, where you think you've worked really hard. So the rationalization, I've worked really, really hard, the pericardium channel, and I deserve this. And so then we get into the San Jiao channel, where we get really rigid that this is what I deserve. And where that becomes a problem is as we slip over to the Gall Bladder channel, it's seeing other options, because you probably have worked really hard at this. And if you have, what if it's just one more thing, just one thing that you need to do differently in order to get everything that you want? And in the gallbladder channel, you cannot see other pathways or other options. And so you're stuck in this current belief structure. And then the last one is when we look at the liver channel. What's one of the emotions that come up when this whole thing that you've worked so hard for isn't working? Jealousy. And nobody likes jealousy. So that can give you an idea of how that progresses through that third trinity. And gratitude addresses each one of these different aspects of that third trinity. So rationalization, well, okay, so you've worked really hard and you're not getting what you want because of whatever, but then there's the other side of it is, what is it that you have done really, really well, and acknowledging that and being really grateful that you've been able to do that, you've been able to accomplish that, and that you're moving forward in life. And then you get to the San Jiao, where you're becoming focused on one avenue or one way of dealing with a situation, and acknowledging that and being grateful that you can even acknowledge the fact that you've gotten really focused here. And maybe there's an opportunity to find a different path, which gets you to your gall bladder and then to your liver. So gratitude, it might be hard to practice at first, but whatever we practice is what we become. So maybe you practice it once a month, but if once a month is more than you're doing right now, that's going to get you closer to wherever it is you want to go in life. And gratitude is about acknowledging yourself and acknowledging others. So just by finding a way to better accept yourself or to better be in love with yourself, it gives you the opportunity to open up a whole new world for yourself. So I hope that gives you some ideas on how you can change that whole third trinity with gratitude, with whatever way it is you're practicing gratitude. Maybe it's thanking yourself at the end of the day. Maybe it's all about you internally to start out with. And at some other point in time, maybe it's about telling other people that you're really grateful to have them in your life, or that you're really grateful to have them around, that your life's easier with them here, or that whatever you learned from somebody that made your life easier. Okay, so that is the third trinity, and understanding what are some of the behavioral changes that will happen as you're trying to cope with things that have gotten to the third trinity. So you've got the pericardium, the San Jiao, the gall bladder, the liver, and the different behaviors that might show up when you've been trying to cope with life and we're currently at the third trinity. Now, all of these things are changeable. What these behaviors do is they tell you, oh, here's where I'm at. I've been dealing with this for a long time, and I've been creating this type of personality, and maybe I want it to be different. And you can change all of that. Everything that happens in these trinities is completely changeable. Okay, thanks for coming out, and until next time, I will catch you on the other side.